we're a Christian country. I can imagine that the temptation, and probably it has been succumbed to at various times, in Islamic environments is to say, well, you know, it would really be much better in our society if we really had a pure Islamic society in which Islamic values permeated absolutely every corner of our lives. And to me, a big question is, what are the limitations on this freedom on the two traditions? And then I'd like to recapture at some point some of the spirit of the earlier discussion, because when I said something about the church's responsibility about the kind of attacks that have taken place on Muslims and on Islam in this country, I think that there is maybe some room for all of us to take responsibility in these areas. And at certain points, perhaps, to say some things together about these things. I know that the Catholic bishops made a very important statement along with the Muslim World League at some point. And I wonder if there are some things we might do. I'm sorry I introduced about 2 or 3 different things, but I'd really like some discussion about this, the freedom for, because I think it lies at the heart of this question of Sharia and what makes Christians a little bit afraid.
Excuse me, could we just, according to our schedule, preaching the freedom for preaching their faith, for building places of worship, for holding positions of government. But let's just take 5 minutes on this, and we want to bring in the other parts. And
no, just to make a very brief answer from my own experience. I have gone into high school in Egypt. And this is what I've seen done. I hope it's still being done, because that was very tolerant. First of all, when we used to go as kids, some of you might remember those who come from Egypt. It was what you might call an ecumenical prayer. يا إله العالمين يا مجيب السائلين هب لنا منك رشادا وسدادا ويقينا. Nothing that's offensive to Christian or Jew. O Lord of all mankind, all the universe. O you who respond to those who pray to you, give us guidance and success in our lives. I have no problem at all if somebody in the United States bring Muslim children and have a statement like that, but not necessarily say, and in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, to have truly ecumenical. I have no problem with that. Secondly, whenever we had a religious studies class, I have seen it with my own eyes. At the same time that our Quranic study classes are scheduled, they would also collect the minority Christian from different classes, bring a priest, and they go to their own class and give on their teaching. And I read you this morning from the statement from the head of the church, the Eastern Church in Sudan, that the government even trained the teacher, give them all opportunity, let them have their own Christian curriculum to teach their own children. I wouldn't mind if in America, even though I know there is a constitutional problem there, but I wouldn't mind it at all if teaching Christian values or religious values would be presented in the school, either in an ecumenical way, not necessarily from one point of view or the other, in a comparative religious standpoint, in a fair academic way, or to have Christian values taught, but allow Muslims also to have Islamic values taught, and it's beneficial for both.
Okay. Just 1 minute.
Just 1 minute.
You're being censored.
One of the things that Islam brought to the scene is the recognition of the Jews and the Christians as a community. It is mandated on Muslims to recognize these as a very integrate part of our community. So the so-called pure Islamic society, as being quoted here, does not necessarily mean extermination of others or elimination of others or driving them out or ethnic cleansing, in other words. So the pure Islamic society is a society that resembles the Quran, dealing with Muslims, non-Muslims, pagans, idol worshippers, anybody that comes in a fair way, in a just way. So the pure Islamic society, as people try to say, we want a pure Islamic state, it doesn't necessarily mean extermination of others. I wanted just this to clear.
Thank you, that's important. Could I ask 4 others to join us? The discussants? Jean and Lois, would you be willing to come and join us? Mohammed and Sister Bay? Okay.
I'm publishing it.
I think it's a good idea to not have
Send
side.
it.
You would be welcome to join us.
Could I join you?
We're all on the same side.
Please.
The side of God, I hope.
Good. Thank you.
With the blessing of Dr. Haddad establishing new world order here.
You need to go there.
All right. Who would like to make the first comment or observation? Muhammad.
I find it, in a way, quite legitimate for minorities in a predominantly Muslim societies to have certain concerns as to what the future would hold for them when an Islamic state is established. And I think that they do have the right to ask questions, and I think that they do have the right to get convincing answers to those questions. That in recognition of the historical gap that has taken place for a host of reasons between the last model Islamic state that was in existence and the present time, and also in light of the environment, the present environment in which many of those Muslim societies exist, from lack of freedom, oppression, and so on. However, I would also argue that non-Christian minorities, or maybe even Muslims, do have legitimate reasons living in non-Muslim societies, predominantly Christian societies. Now, we seem to be equating the West in general as a whole, as a lump sum of communities, whereas in fact, at least in my personal opinion, I think the West is in fact, its treatment of minorities is not all the same. The western part of Europe has vividly taken a distinct position, distinguished from at least the predominant position of the Americans regarding the minority or the situation in the Balkans, the Bosnians. So that gives legitimacy to Muslims as a minority living under a non-Muslim society to probably have those questions addressed, especially when lives are indeed at stake. I'd like to raise that issue and see whether there are thinking from the Christian as well as the Muslim side related to the treatment of minorities in a religious context from a Christian standpoint.
Any answer? Want to try? Stab it?
Sure.
Right.
Jean, did you want to venture a comment on that?
Not going to be my most popular comment. George Bush talked this country into bombing the Iraqis. 150,000 dead Iraqis, minimally. I feel terrible about, and it comes from my faith perspective, the treatment of the Muslims, the treatment of minorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But I have never seen the United States engage militarily anywhere where there wasn't more slaughter as a result. So I personally am very hesitant to say that there should be this bombing with these so-called smart bombs, only 7% of which hit the right targets. And I'm very concerned about that. Because I do feel that other countries have a responsibility to the minority communities that are suffering there. But in my 55 years of experience, I have never seen the United States do it for purely generous reasons. And when we have engaged with some full military hoo-ha, we have wound up slaughtering and subsequently usually enslaving somebody. So, I think the world, I would like to see the Europeans get involved in this in some way. And I would like to see the United States kept under control in any kind of event that goes on there.
Could I have just a very brief comment on that?